James Johnson, Spyglass Realty, back on again, third time.
Yes, sir.
This time came with a list of topics that he wanted to talk to. I'm always trying to chase you around to get you on the podcast, but this time he felt like he had something that he wanted to chat about.
Got a little bit to say. Yeah.
So come with it, man.
So really just kind of wanted to get in a bunch of the people that I've helped this year have been first-time home buyers, and that's for a couple of different reasons. So I'm really getting in tune with what's the best way to help those people, what's the best benefits of it. So that's what I really wanted to highlight on the podcast, right? Go through a couple of things, kind of like the high-level stuff.
Yeah.
So I have some topics prepared, ultimately to give people who are thinking about buying a home or considering it, what are the main important things that you should be looking for, right?
Sure.
Because everybody asks the questions, but at the end of the day, as a first-time home buyer, you don't know what you don't know. You've never been through it before, so just trying to shed some light on some of the more basic concepts.
What's the big one right now? That's the let's start with the blockbuster, man.
Rates are coming down.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people have been sitting on the fence waiting for, and it's happening, been waiting for it for a long time, but I think you told me, you're right, we've had like a solid week of good, positive movement. So
almost 2 weeks.
Yeah. So what people are waiting for is finally coming. So, if you were waiting on the rates, if you were waiting on stuff to come down, well, you might want to get your gear ready and get your
what's your new
going.
excuse?
Yeah, right. You're not going to be able to use that one for much longer. So really to kind of dive in, and of course, I have some topics. Ultimately, though, the dialogue is what's going to help people kind of understand it, right? Have that nuanced conversation. So the first one we want to get into is just understanding the true cost of home ownership, right?
Okay.
A lot of people, whether or not they know or have a full understanding, right, there's misconceptions and there's just regular perceptions about what does it cost to own a home, what does it cost to buy a home. So really beyond the purchase price, right, home ownership comes with a couple of different costs. So really just wanted to dive in, right, stuff like property taxes, homeowners insurance, maintenance, repairs, utilities. These are items that you really want to think about going in, just so you have a good understanding. Of course, we can always talk about the benefits of home ownership, but I feel like a lot of people are very focused on cost these days. So kind of just wanted to bounce that off of you. I mean, is that stuff that you feel people are mostly worried about, or?
I definitely know people that are renting. One of the things that they talk a lot about is like, I enjoy renting because if something breaks or anything along those lines, it's not my responsibility. But fun story, we have somebody in the office here who rents, and she found out the hard way that it doesn't always go as planned. She ended up having to live in her apartment with black mold because there was a leak and nothing got fixed for like almost 2 weeks. And, she was having like a meltdown about it, and it sucked. It was terrible. And it was an example of, things aren't always going to be like you think they are, even when you're renting. And I think that when we talk about the true cost of home ownership, I think it's important that even when you're buying a new build, like, it never ends. There's always maintenance. And yeah, you definitely want to prepare for it.
I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to get this home, or maybe it's a new home, maybe it's not, and it's just going to be in that same condition forever.
Right.
And like many other parts of your life, the work never ends, right? You're always going to have to wash clothes because clothes always get dirty.
Mm-hmm.
You're always going to have to take a shower, right? Like there's things that are always going to happen, and owning a home and having a home is no different. I mean, even when you're a renter, right? Oftentimes you end up taking on costs that you didn't foresee just so you can live there better, right?
Yeah.
Like, I built a little shade on the backyard of my house, right? I mean, we rent now, and we couldn't even use the backyard because there was no shade. We would just get roasted by the sun. Furniture would get killed. And so the only way that we could really enjoy it was to, spend a couple $100 and have a brother-in-law come in, and we built it ourselves just so we can enjoy it, right? So
Nice.
even if you are just a renter, there's going to be costs that you're going to incur. Yeah, of course, you can always try to get the landlord to cover it, but there's no guarantee. But when it's your own home, you have the right, you have the choice, you pick the paint color, you pick the design, right? You have that autonomy over your domain. You get that control that you wouldn't otherwise have. You don't have to ask.
Well, and you're not waiting around for somebody to fix something. I get the idea is that, in the analogy I just utilized, the idea was, well, something broke, now I don't have to pay for it. But what's the cost of, living in a construction zone for 2 weeks while waiting for the company who's going to pay for it to get someone out there.
Standing water.
Because you don't want to spend the money on a place you don't own. I get that, but at the same time, if you own the place, you probably could have had somebody out there in a few hours, and you'd be up and running in a way shorter period of time than 2 weeks.
Time is sometimes more important than the money, right? And also just the quality of your life, right?
Well, I can make money. I can't, I can't get back time.
Can't create time.
Right.
Yeah. So next one, this is really in your domain, but kind of want to hear the importance of good credit scores.
Yeah, I mean, so twofold. I mean, the obvious is, you're going to get a better deal if you have a good credit score, but this comes back to time and money, man. The difference in rates when we're talking about credit scores really is, in my opinion, and maybe I'm just thinking with my own wallet type of situation, but it can save you a couple $100 a month on the high end every month. And I know what everybody's saying, like, well, that adds up, but if you're not going to buy a home over a couple $100, in my opinion, you weren't really into it. But what I think is the most important about credit is the process that's associated with someone who has a good credit score versus someone with a low credit score is night and day. So if you want to be constantly questioned throughout the entire process, constantly concerned that your loan could be denied, constantly worried that, they're going to ask for this and that, and, you're in the middle of your workday, like, having a good credit score eliminates not all, but quite a bit of that. I love it when someone has a good score because, again, we are trying to produce a experience, and the experience is just way better when an underwriter looks at someone with a good credit score and kind of goes, okay, well, yeah, we've seen that they've, done well in the past, and they're not going over the deal with a fine-tooth comb trying to almost figure out what's wrong with it, right?
They're looking at it from a good perspective,
Yeah.
not what else is wrong here.
Right. That's a good look. And yes, it can save you money, but the headaches that are gonna not be there if you have good credit, in my opinion, is really where the value comes.
Right. Another thing, I know we kind of talked about how it'll save you some money. I just ran into a scenario where somebody on their own credit reporting, oh, I'm in 780s, 760s, and I know you've told me before kind of
Happens
about the
every
difference.
time.
But if you're looking on your own app, keep in mind that that's a consumer reported score, and
Correct.
that's a lot different than when a loan professional goes out and they run your credit, they get back a totally different picture.
Yeah, credit reports cost us anywhere between $125 to $175. It's the part of owning a business on my end that I hate, because pulling someone's credit, the credit reporting bill at the end of the month makes me sick to my stomach, because we don't close all of those deals. And, we talk about like overhead expenses in real estate, and I talk to realtors, and you have no idea what we spend on the lending side of things as far as fixed costs that we don't get back. But the point I'm trying to make is that if a true credit report is $125 to $175, there is no company on this planet that is going to spend that kind of money to give it to you for free, right? If you really want a free credit report, call me. I'd be happy to pull your credit for you and do a loan consultation. If you want a real credit report, and I will pay the money to do that. That's as free as it's going to come. But we typically see that whatever you're getting on like your credit card bill or Credit Karma, it's usually about 20 to 30 points lower than what it is on there. So I talk to people. They're like, I have an 800 credit score, and I think, yeah, sure. And we pull it, and they're 780, which is a phenomenal credit score, right? But it's so interesting to me. Like, everybody knows that 800 is a good credit score.
Everybody's kind of,
that's the number, man.
You're fixed, right?
Like nobody says like I'm in the high 700s. Like, I have an 800 credit score. Like, okay.
And then I do know, and this is kind of if you got to the point where, hey, we're talking about getting closing costs to help pay for rate buydowns, right? And we'll kind of go into that, but I've recently gotten more clarity where obviously there's different buckets and different levels of different credit scores where 700 to 740 is in one, and then 740 to 780, and it's important to note that the higher it is, the less it will cost to get that rate down.
That's true.
You know,
That's true.
so a builder may be advertising, hey, you know, with 10% closing costs, we can get you to a 4.5
Right.
interest rate. But then you go and they pull your credit. It's like, okay, well, it was worse than what we advertised, so you're actually going to get a 4.99. You know,
Yeah,
and that's because the credit wasn't as good as they had it advertised as.
that is definitely one of those things in the business that is difficult to stomach. You know, I, I get from a consumer standpoint, you want a general idea of what costs are, but it is, I mean, interest rates are like snowflakes, man. Like, it's not just your credit score, it's also how much money are you borrowing. That's one thing I run into on a semi regular basis that the average consumer doesn't think about. A lender is going to make way more money on a higher loan amount than a lower loan amount. So I run into situations where someone's like, "Yeah, I'm buying this $500,000 home. I'm gonna put like $300,000 down. I have a 700 plus credit score. My job time's good. I'm gonna get the best rate, right?" Well, if you read the fine print on a lot of these advertisements, they usually base them on like $400,000 to $500,000 loan amounts.
Mm-hmm.
So all things the same with credit and with income and with down payment. The next one that no one thinks about is we're going to give a way better deal to the guy who's like, well, I got everything that guy's has, but I'm only putting 5% down. We're
Mm-hmm.
getting a better rate to that dude who's putting down 5%.
Because that percent on the
It's a higher
investor
loan amount,
side, yeah, they're going to
right?
make more money on their
Hell
side.
yeah, we're going to make way more money on like $450,000 than that $200,000 transaction.
So we'll give you an incrementally better rate.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, spend more money with us. We're going to give you a better deal.
Right.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about the difference between a pre-approval and a pre-qualification, because a lot of people think, oh, I just need to be pre-qualified. Most people don't even want to get pre-qualified before they start shopping. But
Right.
even in a market that is very buyer-weighted and the buyer has a lot of leverage, there's still a lot of benefit of getting either pre-qualified or pre-approved, but kind of go over the difference between getting pre-qualified and then taking a step further to get pre-approved.
Yeah. I mean, I'll explain the difference, but then I think what's more important is to explain what it can do for you as a buyer. Because I think buyers at the end of the day, especially ones that have good credit and all of that, they aren't thinking about why they need to get approved right away or even get a full approval, because in their minds, they're like, there's not going to be any issues. So like we'll deal with it when it gets here. But a pre-qualification is you've taken an application, we've pulled your credit, and we are going off of everything that you've told us verbally, right? So you could tell me that, you're the king of England and, you have all the money in the world, and I just take that at face value, and I look at your credit score and I look at what you told me that you made, and I say, yeah, I think you're good for it. That's a pre-qual. So, one of the big culprits in the business is Rocket Mortgage. I mean, you can go online right now and you can get a pre-approval letter and you don't have to talk to anybody. But the problem with that is there's bad guys out there, and there's people that surprisingly don't know how much money they make, or they fail to mention that they owe money in back taxes, or they fail to mention that they've got child support for like 6 kids with 3 different moms, right? And like, I'm halfway joking, but it happens. And so those pre-qualifications are garbage. They really are. The next step is a pre-approval, where you're completing an application. You are providing, at this point, all of the necessary income documentation, and myself as a lender is making a decision based on the data that I have. So it's a much stronger approval because my license is on the line, my reputation's on the line, and I have done the extra legwork to,
Vet the information.
out.
Yeah.
Then there's the third thing, which is what we do, which is we call it our fast pass approval, which is I'm taking a full application, we are collecting the documentation, and then we are sending your file into a physical human being underwriter. We're doing all the updated data verify information, so we're checking to see if you've got those back taxes. We're checking to see if you're paying child support or alimony or anything along those lines. We're checking with your employer to make sure like you still work there. And so what that allows us to do is it allows us to put 0 days as a financing contingency on the contract. So let me get into now, what does this mean for the buyer, right? Because again, the guy who thinks he's got it together, he's like, I don't need to do any of that because I know I'm good. Well, just like everything, nobody has anything bad to say about themselves, right? So when you, Mr. 800 credit score, works in tech, makes a ton of money, could buy the house in cash, even if he had to, when you say that, no one believes you, because for every one of you that is honest, there's 2 of you that are full of shit, right? And every listing agent has had a situation happen where someone has beat their chest and been like, I'm good for it, and the deal doesn't go through. And that PTSD is strong.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you are doing all of the things that I made mention of, and now you have a lender providing a full underwriting approval, not only that, but you've got someone like myself reaching out and going over the fact to the real estate agent, this is where we're at with this file. Everything's good to go. And then lastly, because we are so far along in the process, we're in a position to close in as quickly as 10 days. Now, as a seller, the one thing that I've identified as a seller that everybody wants is a guarantee. They want to know when they accept that offer that they're going to get what they asked for, and that it's going to happen, right? And so to increase the feeling of guarantee is the most important thing when you're a buyer, because when you find a home, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to be the guy who has the 800 credit score, blah, 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 and he sees the house and has done zero research, and he's going to say, oh, you want 500? I'll offer you 490, right? He's not going to pay asking price, right? And so then it's like, okay, well, what kind of leverage are we going to produce to get them to come down $10,000? It's like, well, I have an 800 credit score, and I could buy this house in cash and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, no one believes you, so what else? Well, we can get you your money right away. Okay, how? Well, we're going to do financing. How quickly? I don't know. I'll talk to my bank. Like, it's just not a good look. Right? So
you
when
don't have that complete package in place.
So we've helped. So I think, as a public service announcement to buyers, like having that full approval, even if you think you're the man or the woman that has it all together, no one's going to believe you. And if you're truly trying to get the best deal, which that's what everybody wants, that's how you do it. That is literally how you do it. You're doing yourself a disservice. You will not get as good of a deal if you're not coming in like guns blaze, plain and simple.
And you might still get a good deal, but you could probably get a better one if you had all the leverage weighted in your favor. Yeah. And like in the market that we have, of course, sellers are desperate to sell, right? They're having to compete with 10 other houses in the same neighborhood. But that also comes with some uncertainty, right? And like you said, every seller is looking at the person on the other side of the table and both security or liability. And if you can check more boxes on the security side than the liability side, well, they're going to be that much more willing to play ball. And the terms that you'll be able to get, which is more importantly, or sometimes more important than the actual number itself, could be that much more beneficial, right? Like having your full stuff, having everything underwritten, and being pretty much a done deal, almost like a cash offer. That seller is going to be willing to give you a lot more simply because of that versus, oh, yeah, hey, we still need to get pre-approved. They're going to, and
a lot of times it's the speed of things.
Right.
I mean, if you have a motivated seller who maybe, already bought their other house and they need this thing to sell, you tell them, hey, we're going to have a check for you in 10 days, which, by the way, I think it's funny. People who buy in cash, it still takes 10 days for title to transfer.
Right.
So if we can do financing as quickly as cash, like as a seller who's motivated, I don't care if you've got your 800 scores and you're going to, oh, I'm good to go. And then you go into your Wells Fargo or wherever and they need 30 days to close. Again, not a good look. Like somebody's going to come in that probably doesn't have the score you have and doesn't have the cash you have. And they're going to be approved by me and we're going to close that deal in 10 days and they're going to choose us over you.
Because there's more certainty. There's more security.
And it's quicker. Sellers want their money now.
Yeah.
So.
Right on. So this is, I guess, a little bit more about something that I would help do, but a lot of people want to know or want to make sure that they're researching the neighborhoods that they're going to live in. And one thing, that really comes down to why you would want to do that is so you can have that, forward look as far as your appreciation and your investment goes. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you've been in the business a long time. You've seen a lot of people buy and sell and then wait 10 years and sell and then buy again, right? I think it's really important to have someone on your side that helps research that, which obviously, you're limited in some of the data that you can see as far as neighborhoods, of course, familiarity with any area, but it's important when you're a first-time home buyer to pick a place that is going to be a relatively good neighborhood or at least have, a lot of upward appreciation because at the end of the day, it is an investment, right? You want to make sure that you're not going into a place where the values have a higher chance of going down than they do of going up.
Schools, man.
schools are very important, right? That's what, even if you're a first time home buyer and you don't have kids, which first time home buyers aren't always young, right? I've helped people who were in their 50s and they're still first time home buyers. But, if you're somebody who doesn't have kids, it may not be that important of a deal to you. But to the person that's going to buy your house in 5 to 10 years, it's going to be important, right? Because they may have a family.
I always tell people, if you really want to get crazy and, be in control of the appreciation on your property, because for the most part, it's out of your control. But if you really do want to be in control, you need to get involved in like super dialed down local politics, because school systems is really what drives, what's the number one thing that people will spend money on without even thinking twice about it? It's their kids and their pets, depending on who you are. And so, what do people want for their children? They want them to be successful. They want to make sure that they're educating them. And I've watched people buy homes in areas that they could barely afford simply because they wanted to be a part of that school system.
Right.
So if you're tracking school systems and, you're making sure that levies are passing, you're making sure that you know where the funds are allocated. And if you really want to get crazy and, be in control of your appreciation, you should get involved in local politics in terms of what's going on, because you could control the appreciation of your property if you make sure that you're encouraging people to move there.
Right, right. Let's talk about the importance of a home inspection. Obviously, you've bought a couple properties yourself, and obviously being on the lender side, of course, if stuff comes back super bad on a home inspection, right, it can really hurt a deal. And I think it's just important, right? I will always advise any person, new construction or not, to get a home inspection, right? Even a brand new home could have stuff that was overlooked. On your end, do you see, home inspections hurting deals more often than not, or do you think most of the time, they just give buyers more ammo?
So that's a loaded question, man. So I think what's important about a home inspection is the way that you leverage it. So let's talk about getting a home inspection, right? Like, you can get a home inspection, and that is definitely going to give you peace of mind. It can put you in a position to where you know exactly what's going on with the property. You can avoid a major financial pitfall.
Because you can uncover something that
Yep.
maybe you didn't see the first time you fell in
Even
love
when
with
you
it.
do uncover something, it can give you additional negotiating power. And those are all of the beauties of a home inspection. On the flip side of things, there is a ton of leverage associated with not getting a home inspection. I have personally never gotten a home inspection on all 4 of the properties that I've owned. And I do it because I leverage not getting a home inspection with a reduction in the price. And so a lot of people think this is kind of crazy, but the way that I see it is, there are certain things that you don't have to be a home inspector to know what's wrong with the property. And because of that, if the roof is caving in, there's a roof problem, and chances are the listing agent has priced that in. And if the foundation is crumbling, you're going to see that, and if it's been priced in. So the way that I look at it is, what are your most expensive repairs? Usually a roof or a foundation, right? General cost on something like that's going to run about $25,000 to $30,000. So the way that I've always negotiated things is, I'm going to assume that I'm going to need to have something that's going to cost $25,000 to $30,000 fixed on this house. Might be the furnace, might be the HVAC system, but for the most part, there's nothing that's going to cost more than 25 to 30K, right? I mean, we could nitpick.
Worst case scenario, right? But
so if I have a property that's listed at 500,000, it's worth every bit of 500,000. The comps will support it. I know the average person's coming in and offering $490 for that property. I'm coming in on that property and offering $475,000 with no inspection, and I'm explaining exactly what I just explained. And going back to the guarantee, sellers love that. The fact that I'm coming in without an inspection and saying, look, I'm not going to beat you up after inspection because there isn't going to be one, right? And
that 475 is 475.
And I'm not going to walk away because of an inspection result,
right?
Because I'm buying this house. It is happening. Anything short of me dying, basically, is the only reason that I'm not buying this house from now until closing. As long as I can stay alive, I'm buying this house. But here's the caveat to it.
Right.
I'm asking you to sell me this property for basically 20% under what you want for it.
Under ask you.
And I've been very successful with that. One of the homes that I've purchased, I would say 8 months in, the entire HVAC system went out. We probably could have caught that during inspection. We made some calls. We ended up getting it replaced for like $10,000. But I got that house for $25,000 less. In my mind, I'm still in the black 15K.
Mm-hmm.
This does not work for people who don't have money.
Or if you don't
If you
know,
don't, right, if you don't have the money to make the repair,
yeah.
you probably shouldn't be negotiating in terms of what I'm saying. But
I mean, you also have a lot of experience in doing little
yeah, I'm
projects
handy.
and work and
Yeah.
stuff. So, if you're somebody, who maybe works in construction, or you are a plumber or an electrician, and like you feel like you can kind of take on no matter what could come at you, you can use that as a leverage tool for sure.
Yeah. So I only gave that long-winded answer because I'm one of these people that I don't think that there is a one size fits all for anything.
For sure.
I would say though the average person, I would absolutely get an inspection. I think just to help you sleep at night, I think it's great. But if you're a big like I just want the deal, I can handle like I like to, I mean what I just described is kind of risky, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is. Because if I didn't have the extra $10,000 to fix that HVAC system, well then I'd really be up shit's creek,
Right.
right? It'd be real hot this summer. But that's how it goes. I've had other homes where here's another thing that I've done, by the way. So on one of the homes, we did a post-purchase inspection. So we bought the home, negotiated everything, got a really good deal on it because we waived inspection, and then we had an inspector come out to the property and inspect it afterwards just to make sure that there wasn't anything that would be super pressing before we started like making upgrades and like, oh, we'll spend like $10,000 to
On the
upgrade the kitchen and
kitchen,
then
the
all of a sudden
bathroom.
the HVAC blows up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really good feeling because the one house we had a post inspection on and they came out and they were like, there's, outside of just general bullshit, it was like, there's nothing wrong with this. And that's a great feeling.
That's one of the things that I try to keep in mind is like, because some home inspections are going to cover some bad stuff. Best case scenario, it uncovers a bunch of minor stuff, whether that's code or, oh, this light bulb's out or, oh, the filters need replacing. At least it gives you a baseline
Mm-hmm.
for going forward now that you're the homeowner to see, hey, these are things that I need to be looking out for, right? Whether it's, okay, the HVAC is 15 years old and maybe in the next 5 years or so it's going to need to be replaced, at least so you know going forward what's
Yeah.
on the horizon.
Yeah,
right?
so you can budget for it.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I definitely want to make sure that agents are careful about because, we were waiving inspections on almost every single transaction in 2020 and 2021 when you were in multiple offers because it was such a bargaining chip.
Mm-hmm.
And, you had agents that were like, this is a total disservice to the client. We shouldn't be doing this. It's almost unethical. And that's a completely separate debate. But what I was saying at the time was, and I really, now that we're able to get these inspections back, this is like my public service announcement to agents. I really hope that you're careful and mindful of when you're doing these inspections to not like almost intentionally get these inspections with the idea that you're going to renegotiate afterwards, pretty much no matter what. Because in my opinion, the reason why the inspections were being waived was because it became almost like industry standard, like, oh, let's just write an offer and then we'll beat them up during inspection. Well, like, it only takes a couple
So
of
many
deals
of those.
before eventually everybody goes, okay, so like, you're going to offer me $500K, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that after the inspection, you're going to like,
Come back and knock
yeah,
some off of that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's, we as real estate professionals have to walk a line, and I know it's not easy, but it can't just, because then the inspection just kind of turns into something that you don't even want to do anymore. As a seller, you want to be like, you know what, if I can find anybody that'll do this without an inspection, I'm going to pick that offer 100% of the time because I know that this guy over here is, maybe offering more than he is, but I know he's going to try to get to where this guy's at after the inspection and try to use it with leverage.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it can also, as that real estate agent, can put you in hot water. If you tell your buyer, hey, we'll just offer this,
That's a great
and
point.
then when the inspection comes back, we'll be able to negotiate. Well, if it comes back and
Clean.
it comes back clean, okay, well now we're in a position where I've kind of over leveraged and I can't get it back
Right.
because there's no ammo
yeah,
there.
what are you going to ask for?
So I mean, can you bring that up? Hey, stuff might come back. We may be able to negotiate, but if you're like, oh, when it comes back, we're going to be able to. I mean, you could set yourself up for some serious failure, and then that buyer doesn't have that good experience.
I think it's just a game that was played, and again, going back to my line that I keep repeating is a seller wants a guarantee, And what they don't want is games. And the idea that you're going to make an offer on a property with full intention of knowing that you're going to figure out a way to try to renegotiate after inspection, it's just
If they can find
it's
somebody else who won't.
frustrating. It's frustrating, right? You're like, man, what are we doing? We got to do this dance. Like, what are you going to actually freaking pay me for this house?
At the end of the day, what's it going to end up at? Yeah.
Right.
So obviously, we're kind of swinging back into your realm, right? So can we kind of go over a couple of different mortgage options, that a first-time home buyer could be exposed to, depending on their financials?
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of different names and a ton of different things that are out there, and, they make everything sound exciting and sexy. But at the end of the day, it really just comes down to, first-time home buyers are going to have reduced down payment options, reduced PMI options. And then, we've got some programs with down payment assistance and everything along those lines. But, for the most part, there's nothing that is like wildly amazing for a first-time home buyer. I mean, we definitely have incentives, and by we, I mean like the industry in general. But there's no like no-brainer where it's like, holy, like, it's funny to me because I hate to say this, but everybody's trying to figure out a way to like, dupe the system. And
Beat the
if there was some incentive that was so amazing for a first-time home buyer, we would find people trying to basically commit fraud for it. And nobody's like trying to lie about a first-time home buyer because they're getting some kind of crazy incentive. So, first-time home buyers, you're only required to put down 3%. That's a nice one. There's definitely some incentives for reduced mortgage insurance, PMI, if you're not putting down 20%. And then we've dealt with down payment assistance, which I have mixed emotions about, because down payment assistance, you don't need to be a first-time home buyer, but you can take advantage of down payment assistance, which when you scratch the surface, it sounds sexy. You're like, wait a minute, I can buy a home and not use my money. Well, the short answer is yes. However, your interest rates are wildly higher than market price, and you're going to be followed up with a second mortgage that is basically, it's stuck to your property for a number of years, and you're going to end up paying for it when you refinance. So I'm only a big believer in down payment assistance in the event that you find a property and you literally do not have any money. It's not like a hack. And the Boy Scout in me really doesn't like down payment assistance. I don't even really like the 3% down sometimes, because I was there during 2008. And the idea that you buy a home and put down 3%, and then if something happens, God forbid, a divorce situation, or you lose your job, you don't even have enough equity in the property to sell that home. And not only is that bad for you, that's bad for all of us. Because if you foreclose, now you're a shitty comp in my neighborhood, you're dragging down my property values, banks are tightening up on credit because people are foreclosing. Like, it's bad all around. So as much as I am a champion of home ownership and want to get people in, I think it's imperative that you're at least saving 3 to 5%. You should have skin in the game, and that money isn't a tax or a fee. I mean, it's going towards the equity, and God forbid something happens, you should be able to sell your house.
Right, to get out from under it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously FHA, there's VA, USDA in certain areas, which is a true zero down, zero cost loan, I guess, or zero down payment loan. But depending on where you are, some of that stuff could or could not be available. There's some places in Austin, of course, different what we call census tract areas, that are lower median income, where you can have a property that does qualify for zero down. But when you're looking at that stuff, you don't ever want to get in over your head, because at the end of the day, like you said, if something goes wrong, you want to make sure that you can at least get out from under it and have that seat belt, right? Have that safety in place in case the worst happens. Let's kind of dive a little bit between the difference of down payment and closing costs, because I think
it's a good one.
A lot of people have their own perceptions of, okay, well, I need 20% in order to do this to cover everything. Or they think, okay, I just need my down payment because that's my closing costs as well.
We run into that a lot with VA and USDA, where, just like you said, it's a zero down payment, but zero down payment doesn't mean zero closing costs, right? So you don't have to put any money down as far as the equity is concerned, but you're still going to be on the hook for your taxes, your title, your insurance. I typically tell people to account for at least 2% for all of that. So if you're buying a $500,000 home, your VA, you're putting no money down, you're going to need at least 10K for your closing costs, unless you can negotiate to have the seller pay for that, which we've been successful. I mean, it's doable to get a true no cost purchase with programs like VA or USDA. But yeah, there's definitely a misconception between down payment and closing costs on a regular basis. I go over it with every single client.
Yeah. I mean, your down payment is what you're putting into the property. Your closing cost is just the cost
Yeah, those
to
are
do
just
the
fees,
deal.
right?
You know, I mean, there's a lot of ways for us to get those covered now. I mean, there's a lot of listings. Sellers are really desperate to try to sell. Builders are really desperate to try to sell. So it's like there's a good chance we can get the closing costs covered in many deals, but you still need to account for your down payment if you're not a VA buyer or if you're not going to go on a USDA program where you're a little bit further out of town. You know, so keep that in mind whenever you're kind of evaluating your own thing. Obviously, talk to a professional. They're going to be the one to guide you in the right way for it. But there is a stark difference between having the money for your down payment and then having, you know, the closing costs to do it, right?
Totally.
And if you haven't bought a house, think about it in terms of your cars. Anytime you go and buy a car, you could buy the car in cash, have no loan, but at the end of the day, you still have to pay taxes, title, and license,
Yep.
right? There's just costs that are associated with everything. I mean, you go buy a candy bar, it says it's 99 cents, but it costs you $1.07,
Yep.
right? Because there's always going to be something in there with real estate.
Uncle Sam's always going to take his.
Some people are going to have to get paid, you know, in order to do that. Obviously, we touched a little bit about the first-time home buyer programs. In Texas, we have T-Shack,
Yep.
which
the down
is
payment assistance.
the down payment assistance. Different banks as well could have their own first-time home buyer programs. I know you talked a little bit about the 3% down, which is for a conventional loan. Of course, for FHA, you don't have to be a first-time home buyer to do an FHA loan.
No, you do not.
But, you know, first-time home buyer, you do get a little bit more incentives, and a lot of people really kind of bank on getting that. And I think we've kind of gotten into that before where, oh, well, I'm a first-time home buyer, so everything's going to be less, right?
I mean, I have a situation right now where we have first-time home buyers, but they're lucky enough that they've saved up, you know, a ton of money and they're putting down like over 20%. And so all of the incentives that are associated with a first-time home buyer program like don't apply. So and they're like, well, like it's funny. It's like, well, what do we get? I'm like, I mean, I'm gonna get you a closing gift, like
I'm gonna get you a basket. With
right.
Some
It's like, well, what do you want me
champagne
to do? Like, you know,
You're
like
in great financial
like,
standing.
can we get a lower rate? I'm like, you're getting a lower rate than a traditional first-time home buyer because you're putting so much money down. They're like, I'm like, and then there's PMI reductions, but you don't have PMI because you're putting so much money down. They're like, I'm like, well, what else? I'm like, if you put down 3% right now as a first-time home buyer incentive on the interest rate, I couldn't get you the rate that you're getting right now because you're putting so much money down. Like, if you want the first-time home buyer rate, I'm gonna have to juice your interest rate by like 0.5%.
Right.
How's that sound? They're like, that doesn't sound good.
That's
I'm like,
not an incentive.
you're getting the best deal you could possibly get because you're putting so much money down.
Right. You've obviously had some good time in the business. Let's talk a little bit about that long-term investment perspective, right? I mean, it's a home. You're going to live there, of course, but there is that investment perspective to it. I mean, what kind of stuff have you seen over the years as far as, you know, treating even your own primary residence as an investment or, you know, even if you're an investor looking for investments? I mean, what have you seen over the years?
Well, I think the one thing that's important to remember when you buy a home, let's say you're putting down, you know, 5%, you're only taking 5% of your money as a risk and you're putting it down on this super large investment opportunity that is yielding appreciation year over year, right? So let's just use 500,000. You could take your $25,000 and you could like invest it into the stock market, right? Maybe you'll get like a 10, you know, S&P 500. You can make 10% on 25,000. Or you can take your 25,000 and you can invest it into real estate and now you're making year over year appreciation on 500,000. What sounds better? You know, like
10% of 500 or 10% of 25.
Right, exactly. And even if you're not making 10% of 500, what if you're making 6%, which just so happens to be the year over year appreciation? I'll take 6% appreciation on $500,000 over 10% on 25,000 every day.
Every day.
And so the investment, you know, that's associated with it, in my opinion, is kind of a no-brainer. And just like a stock, you know, you're not going to get that money until you sell. And real estate goes up and down. I would not encourage anybody to, you know, try to do quick flips or anything like that unless you're seasoned. But when we're talking about people buying a home that they're going to live in, I mean, if you're living in a property for 3 to 5 years, you're going to be hard pressed to not, you're going to be hard pressed to lose, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just the chances. And most people usually, I believe the last statistic I heard was people on average live in a home, I think it's like 7.5 years.
So like 5 to 7. Mm-hmm.
So everybody's hitting that 5 year mark, right? 10 year, I don't know anybody who's owned a home for 10 years that didn't do well on it. And yeah, I'm just a big, I'm a big believer in, it's debatable if you want to like do investments and rentals and stuff like that. You kind of have to have an appetite for that. But, to argue like maybe renting is better and keeping my money in the market, like I haven't seen it and I don't see it in the future.
I mean, very easily, if you'd have bought a home 10 years ago in Austin,
Oh my
you
God.
probably would have doubled your investment.
Easily.
Right.
Easily.
I mean, I look at.
Well, remember when we're saying investment here, like I look at it like I mean, where can you imagine if you were to invest money in the stock market, right? So like let's say I've got $25,000 and I'm going to invest it in the S&P 500. And there was someone else that was like, "Oh, I want to go in 475,000 with you." Like people be investing in the stock market like crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now I got a $500,000 chip that I'm putting in the marketplace. Like no brainer, right? That's what buying a home is,
Right.
right? Like nobody's following you up on the S&P or saying, "Oh, you got 25, oh, I'll put 475 up." It's insane.
Right.
It's insane. And
I mean,
I
and
don't
you
see how people don't see that.
live inside the S&P 500.
That's true.
You know,
You
like
can't wash your clothes and take a shower.
You could put your 25 into the stock market, but then if you're only renting, well, then you're basically washing 25,000 a year down the drain.
Right.
And you could be putting it into an investment that, one, you're putting a portion of your money in because it's part of your living expense, so you're kind of stacking money in the bank. And then if the investment goes up, then you have that return there. If you just have money in the market, well, you got to outpace this by so much more because you're also going to be
Renting.
getting nothing back
Right.
from your rent because whenever you move out, you don't have anything there. Obviously, half, if not more, of our job has to deal with emotions.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, for
So, as a first-time home buyer, remember it's not just a financial transaction. It's definitely an emotional journey. Can you give me one good and one bad example of how emotion, impacted a transaction for you?
Sure. Let's start with the bad ones because I remember those more vividly. I actually just had one where we had an inspection come back and this couple just like freaked out, man. I mean, you would have thought that the homeowner like went in the house and broke things before the inspection. Like they were so offended at some of the things that came back on the inspection, and it's like this is a used home. Like what
Somebody
did you
lived here.
And like all of the things that the inspector has notated are not like
Dire.
well, no, it's not only that, but it's like they're not things that like the seller like went and did intentionally.
Just wear and
It's just
tear.
wear and tear. But they were like they're upset, and so that deal ended in a mutual release. Which, by the way, fun fact I just heard is right now over 20% of transactions are ending in mutual releases. It's the highest that we've seen in over a decade. Is right now in this market. I've got some ideas as to why, but that's very interesting to me. Emotionally, in terms of good situations, I mean, I've seen lots of tears in a good way. I try to tug on those heartstrings early on in the phone call. One of the things that I always ask is, what's made you decide to purchase now? And nobody gives me the real answer the first time, so I usually start digging. But the ones that, emotionally feel really good is I do run into situations where we've got like single mothers or, even just couples that have children that are currently renting and they really want their kids to grow up in a home where, it's their house and they know that they're not renting it. They know that there's no possibility that the landlord's going to, raise rent or worst case even say, hey, we're going to go ahead and rent this to someone else. So that stability in regards to home ownership when children are involved is very, exciting. And I've definitely been at closing tables with crying mothers who just, couldn't believe that home ownership was even going to ever be an option in their lifetime. And that's a really feel good thing. So those are transactions that, the emotions are high because the fear of being told no is it's heartbreaking.
That's real.
Yeah. And so when those transactions close, like, it's a good feeling.
I'm going through it with a buyer right now where they were kind of between two different properties. And thankfully, in the market that we have with a ton of inventory, we were kind of picking between two really good options. And
Hmm.
I brought it up to him. I was like, if we had been looking at this 4 or 5 years ago, we would have been deciding which one sucked less because we just needed a place to live.
Right.
And ultimately, it was an emotional decision for them because they said, we like this one more. It's in the back of a neighborhood. It backs to farmland. We can really see raising kids there. It's overlooking a countryside. Like that's something that we're not going to get versus, being in a neighborhood. Well, yeah, we're close to the community pool and we're close to a good high school, but this one just speaks to us more. And so, obviously half of our job is managing expectations. And obviously we always want to do the best that we can, but of course it's always going to be emotional, right? There's always going to be an emotional aspect to buying a house.
Well, and I like that story because that is one thing over the last few years that I unfortunately feel like I hate it. Like, I wish that people purchased homes a little more based on like what they wanted and stopped looking at, the damn numbers so much. Like, and that's not because like I want to sell a deal. Like, you know, buying a home should be fun. It should be a good experience, and you're gonna raise a family there. You're gonna have Thanksgivings there, and I really want that to be something that people are more like in tune to, because the whole just being 100% transactional, truthfully, I know it sounds cliche, but that's like that just makes my job suck. It really does. Like, I want people to be pumped about buying a house, and I love it when someone's like, you know what, I'm gonna spend a little bit more money because I really like this one better. Like that's such a like life's short, man.
Yeah, there's value. Yeah. I
Like,
mean, you're going to live there,
right.
you're going to be there every single day. If you're going to be unsatisfied with the house that you just spent $500,000 on, well, that's
But
not
I got a good deal. It's like,
yeah,
okay.
like you're going to live there. It's going to be the place where you spend what, 75% of your day, 60% of your day,
Yeah.
depending on if you work from, I mean, if you work from home,
Yeah,
it may
some
be
people it's
100%, right?
100%,
So it's
yeah.
like it needs to be a place that you're really in love with, that really speaks to you, you know, call it feng shui, call it vibes, call it, whatever you want,
Call it get what you pay for.
right. And
you
better
know?
stuff comes at a higher price sometimes, but ultimately there's a value there. So to finish it off, let's talk about the value of a good real estate agent. On your end, being the lender, what's the benefit of working with a good agent versus working with one
I
that's
mean, the
not?
number one benefit, just to touch on what we just described, is experience, right? I mean, we've said this 100 times on the podcast, where if you're dealing with a team, is what I like to call it, where, the lender knows the real estate agent, everybody knows the inspector, the insurance company, everybody's basically communicating while you, the buyer, or even the seller for that matter, is off like living their daily life and not having to deal with all of the like day-to-day activity that's involved with selling or buying a home. I don't I don't think you can put a price on it, and unfortunately, the only time I ever like get a pat on the back is when I deal with a home buyer who's had a bad experience, because like right now, first-time home buyers are mainly the predominant buyer in the marketplace, and unfortunately for them, I don't think they know any different. So when they have a good experience, they're not complaining, obviously, but they're also not like, oh my God, that was amazing. Um, I really do enjoy working with someone who's like buying a home for the second time and they're like, that was unbelievable. You guys are the best. Like when I purchased my first home, was a complete shit show.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been involved in transactions where the real estate agents don't know each other. I'm trying to communicate with the real estate agent, but we don't have a relationship, and they treat me like I'm some blood-sucking vampire that just like wants their business. So they only want to hear from me if I like, you
If
know,
there's a
if there's a
problem or
problem. And actually, they don't even sometimes want to hear from me. They want me to connect with their transaction coordinator, and those situations are difficult because we're not all on the same page, and the client can feel it. I don't have children myself, but I just kind of relate it to like, everybody has seen like a little kid walking on the sidewalk, and then all of a sudden he or she falls down, and the parents look over and they're like, "You're okay," right? And the kid gets up, because if they're like, "Oh my gosh, honey," oh, the kid like just
immediately breaks
reactionally
out.
starts crying. It's the same thing with with when you're buying or selling a home, and I mean, sometimes we are. I feel like we're dealing with babies. It's like, look, if we can all say, "Hey, everything's good. This is going to be fine," and we're all on the same page, the client can go, "Okay, well, everyone else thinks it's good," and they can go to work and do their job and pick up their kids from their school and live their life without having this added responsibility of buying and selling, and that is priceless.
I think that's one of the biggest thing that we try to pitch to as far as our value goes, right? It's like you have a whole life, you have a job, maybe you have a family, maybe you have dogs, you know, it's impossible for us to know everything that's going on in your life. The one thing that we can control is making sure that this process is smooth and seamless.
Hmm.
And the best way for us to do that is obviously to work with people that we already know, whether that's title companies or lenders. You know, like we do a ton of business together because it works, because you're really great at your job and I can rely on you.
Yeah,
And so when a buyer comes to me and they have answers, they have questions, you know, stuff that they need to get figured out, it's my job to take it there. That way they can live their life.
right.
You know, because if they're constantly having to do my job for me, well, that's not a great experience, and they're gonna tell me all the bad stuff that I did, and they're gonna tell all their friends to go talk to somebody else. So my job is right to make sure that that process from start to finish makes it seem like, hey, this was a walk in the park. We went and got chocolate, ice cream, and everybody's happy. Because if we had a bunch, I mean, of course, bad stuff happens. And obviously, like we talked about, right, managing expectations and so forth, bad stuff can't come up. But if we're there and we're kind of the thing that stays constant, whether that's communication or trust or whatever, if you have somebody that you know that you're working with that's going to take care of you, it takes a ton of that weight off your
Yeah, bad
shoulders.
stuff is when the little kid falls down. That's the point I'm trying to make. So when something bad happens and the parents go, "Hey, you're okay," and they mitigate the situation, it's a lot better than when you have agents that aren't talking. And here we're in a bad situation. The kid, aka the buyer, the customer's looking to everybody, and everybody's not even paying attention. Kid's gonna trip every time,
Mm-hmm.
every single time.
Because they're just
They don't
reeling
know
on
what to
their own
do.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can smell those fajitas cooking. I can smell the onions and
Yeah,
peppers.
Friday barbecue and mingle, man. I'm always doing these clips at the end of these. Every Friday we put together a networking event where we encourage people to come to the office. We're in South Austin, right by Central Market. We cook up something every single week. This week we're doing fajitas again because it was such a hit last time. I'm normally smoking meats, doing a brisket or a pork belly or things along those lines. But we want people to come through. We want people to eat. We love telling war stories. Hell, get on the podcast if you want to. But swing by. I promise it'll be good for you. At the very least, you'll get yourself a free meal.
Mm-hmm. Free food's always the best.
All right, brother.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
let's eat.
Let's do it.